flytrap, Dionia muscipula, is a threatened or rare species in the wild. I like to include this clip from Nosferatu because it's the first, as far as I'm aware, filmed recording of a Venus flytrap doing its thing, and it's kind of a spooky rainy night where I am, so maybe that's appropriate. It's endemic to just this small patch of the world, but it's been introduced elsewhere. So Apalachicola in the panhandle of Florida, supposedly it's also in Washington and New Jersey, but it's only native to this little chunk of the Carolinas. This is also probably not a surprise to the folks in this room and on this call, but it's a huge surprise when I talk to people who aren't plant people that Venus flytraps do have flowers. All carnivorous plants do, that they have to reproduce. And this is just a close-up of what a Venus flytrap flower looks like. Each individual Venus flytrap puts up about one inflorescence a year, and one of those inflorescences has an average of about 11 of these white understated flowers with 5 petals. And they have huge pollen. If you're not familiar with the sizes of pollen and how they look on bugs, they're huge. You could almost count them with your eyeballs, the grains of Venus flytrap. And so surprisingly, given how charismatic Venus flytrap is and how interesting it is to people, the pollinators to Venus flytrap were only recently described. So a paper came out in 2018 that was led by some people at NC State, just a year before my time, and some other people with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the North Carolina Botanical Gardens. And they essentially went out, captured pollinators off of the flowers of Venus flytrap, to see who was visiting it and who was actually moving the pollen around. And at the same time, they also collected insects out of the traps because they were interested to know if Venus flytraps, if there was overlap between what was visiting the flowers and what was getting caught in the traps. So here are the sort of major players they found for pollinators of Venus flytrap. It's largely sweat bees, which are those little green shiny bees, which are sometimes easy to miss because they're so tiny. And then it's a cavalcade of pretty charismatic beetles, checkered beetles, longhorn beetles, and a few other beetles. But the chief players are sweat bees and a group of beetles. So when they did this project, they were left with a bunch of leftover questions. So they figured out who was visiting the flowers. And here, I'll show you this really quick. They also looked at what was being caught in the traps, and they observed that there was minimal overlap between what was visiting the flowers and what insects were getting caught in the traps. So here in this chart, you can see basically every color is a different kind of insect or bug. And up top are the suite of insects that were visiting the flowers, and on the bottom are the suite of insects that were being caught as prey. And there's a tiny little overlap there between insects that were both pollinating and getting caught. And it's mostly insects that we wouldn't consider effective pollinators. There's a buckeye there, so buckeye butterflies do visit the flowers, but they found a buckeye that was in the trap as a larvae, and then it's a handful of ants and some spiders. But for the most part, there's pretty much minimal to no overlap between who's visiting the flowers and who is getting caught in the traps. And this is an important thing to note because there's this lingering question in pollination ecology when it comes to carnivorous plants. There's this notion of what we would call pollinator-prey conflict. It's sometimes called the carnivore's dilemma, which if you are a carnivorous plant and you have flowers, is it in your best interest to try to avoid eating your pollinators? So there's been a number of studies over the years with various kinds of carnivorous plants to try to figure out, is there ever an overlap between the insects that visit the flowers and the insects that get caught in the traps? And if there is an overlap, is there a cost associated with that? Is that a bad idea? And to sort of prove that there is pollinator-prey conflict going on, researchers need to first observe that overlap, and they also have to observe that cost to reproduction, to growth, to anything, to eating your quote-unquote friends. And the notion of pollinator-prey conflict has only been observed kind of fleetingly 1 or 2 times. It's been observed in this butterwort here on the left that did have an overlap and did have a reproductive cost associated with it. But for the most part, this is still an ongoing question. How often is this experienced? So if we take our findings from that study from 2018, we know that Venus flytrap is good at not catching as pollinators. We know there's minimal overlap, but we're not sure whether that's the result of an evolutionary push to minimize that overlap, or whether it's kind of a side effect of the fact that a lot of plants have their flowers up high. So if you look at the Venus flytrap on the left there, there's about a foot and a half difference in height between where the flowers are and where the traps are. So someone could conceivably look at that and say, oh, this must be an adaptation to minimize that overlap between prey and pollinators. But then you could also look at it and say a lot of plants keep their flowers up high because that's where the pollinators are. So to what degree is that height difference a result of those differing pressures? And so those are the sort of questions where I was brought in on. And to sort of start to answer these questions, I'm mostly going to talk about one chapter of my thesis where we were interested in knowing whether Venus flytrap's reproduction is more limited by how much pollen it gets from pollinators or by how much prey it receives. Because if you accidentally eat your pollinator every once in a while, maybe that's not a big deal because then you get that nutrient boost that allows you to still produce more babies. Maybe it's not a big deal to trap your friends every once in a while. So finding out whether that reproduction is limited by pollen or prey was important. And another question we wanted to ask was, what are the most effective pollinators of Venus flytrap? Who's doing the brunt work, getting most of that pollen from point A to point B? Because if different kinds of bugs have different values as pollinators, that gets at that question too. Maybe it's a bad idea to catch bees, but maybe it's not a big deal if you are capturing ants and spiders every once in a while. So to get at this question, I did this study that had two trials. One that started, I'm covering my own slides here, so I'm just moving my thing around. One trial that started in the summer of 2019 and one trial that started in spring of 2020. And so for each of these trials, I selected 80 plants. And these plants were assigned to one of four treatments, which I've outlined on the left there. They either got supplemental prey in the form of frozen crickets, supplemental pollen that I hand pollinated the flowers with. Some lucky plants got both. They got extra prey and extra pollen, and an unlucky quarter of those plants got nothing. And so that feeding, so there were two trials. One I started feeding in the summer 2019, another trial started feeding in spring of 2020. And then I looked at the reproductive success in terms of number of seeds and flowers in later spring of 2020. While I was doing this, I was also doing a study to determine who were the most effective pollinators of Venus flytrap. And the way that this is typically done in pollination biology is that you cover the plants while they're still in bud. And I did this with those little sort of mesh organza bags that you get at weddings that you get gift items in, your little goodie bags. You put that on while the flower's still in bud, you remove it when the flower is opened, and you wait and observe a single insect visit, and then you collect the stigma and count the pollen grains on the stigma. And the idea is that the more effective pollinators leave more pollen grains on the stigma. It takes a lot of patience, as you can imagine. And just to get an idea of what flytrap pollen looks like, it's thankfully really easy to ID under the scope. Same for sundew pollen. It forms these permanent tetrads. So four pollen grains are actually permanently combined into these tetrads that then subsequently each put out a pollen tubule. So that's what they look like under the scope when I'm counting them. And so these are sort of some results that came out of this. So this is comparing the number of seeds on average produced by plants, whether they were given no prey or prey. And so on the left is that trial that I started in 2019, and on the right is this trial that I started in 2020. And on the left side of either graph represents plants that were given no prey. On the right are plants that were given extra prey. And then whether it is blue or red represents whether it got extra pollen or not. And so if we expected there to be a difference in the amount of pollen on reproductive success, we would expect these two lines to be very different, but they're not. They're pretty much parallel. On the other hand, when we look at the effect of adding more prey, we see an effect. So plants that were given more prey were produced more seeds and more flowers compared to those that weren't. And that was significant in the 2019 trial, which is indicated by that star. And it was not significant in the 2020 trial, but you can still see the pattern sort of emerging there. So prey receipt is really important for reproductive success in Venus flytraps, but in this study, pollen receipt didn't seem to have a huge effect. Meanwhile, if we look at pollinator effectiveness, and we look at these different kinds of bugs and how many pollen grains they were depositing on the stigma, we sort of had an unfortunate outcome where there was an apiary not too far away from my site. So we recorded far more honeybee visits than I was hoping for. Honeybees, of course, are not native. We were hoping to get a snapshot of how native pollinators are performing. But what was interesting is that honeybees did outperform sweat bees, which were previously identified as one of the most common visitors to Venus flytrap flowers. Honeybees deposited more pollen grains. And when I was observing the flowers, I noticed that that sweat bees are so small that they would frequently touch the different reproductive organs without even touching the stigma, whereas honeybees and also carpenter bees and bumblebees to some degree were so huge, they would just sort of be rubbing their body all over the stigma and the anthers simultaneously. So it's somewhat inconclusive, but there's this working theory that perhaps body size has an effect on pollinator success. Something to note here is I did not observe any beetle visits during all these hours of staring at flytrap flowers. And I don't think it was because I was too close to the flowers, because I was sitting there and watching beetles visit my non-covered flowers. So I think this is a study that could continue with some very patient people willing to watch beetles visit flytrap flowers. And maybe they are more effective pollinators. Oop, there you go. What about beetles? And so the conclusions from the study were largely that reproduction in Venus flytrap is limited by prey capture, perhaps more so than pollen receipt. So we could get an idea that perhaps eating your pollinators every once in a while might not be a big deal because you get that reproductive boost, you get those extra nutrients, and there's sort of limited case for pollinator-prey conflict in Venus flytrap. And then we found some evidence that even though sweat bees are frequent visitors, maybe other visitors are playing an outsized role in the reproduction of Venus flytrap and therefore its conservation. I haven't been keeping track of time so well, so please stop me if I'm going over time. But a part of my thesis I wanted to mention just as an update on Venus flytrap is that I was involved with the status survey for Venus flytrap as part of its listing process under the Endangered Species Act. So this was a multi-collaborative effort. I led the effort done by the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, counting and reviewing Venus flytrap populations throughout North and South Carolina over a few years. And I just wanted to share sort of the main results of this, which is the finding that there are about 880,000 individual flytraps in its native range, scattered across 70 extant populations. If you compare that to the maybe 120 extant populations that used to exist. And what's a little bit concerning is that the vast majority of those native flytraps, of that 880,000, are just contained in a small number of populations. So a lot of eggs in just a few baskets. 67% of all native flytraps are in just 3 populations. And when you think about Ouray County specifically, you have in Ouray County one A-ranked population, so that's a population of over 2,000 individuals, and that represents about 1%, a little over 1% of the total population for Venus flytrap is in South Carolina. But those smaller populations are the ones that are especially at risk from things like fire suppression, development, and poaching. And just, you may have heard this news, it was determined that Venus flytrap does not currently warrant listing under the Endangered Species Act. The folks making that decision cited the fact that there are a lot of Venus flytraps and they seem to be doing well and protected where they occur. And so you might wonder what's next for Venus flytrap conservation, and it's a matter of protecting those smaller populations, making sure that we're keeping fire on the landscape, we're keeping an eye on those roadside and backyard populations, which have a tendency to blink out, and just promoting awareness. And there's various ongoing research projects into Venus flytrap. So things are currently ongoing. I also wanted to make a quick plug, which is maybe passes by plant people or people in general, actually, because it's not a very charismatic organism. But there is a species of moth that specializes in eating Venus flytrap, and the moth is far more rare than the flytrap. There's some 40 individuals that have ever been knowingly recorded. And I put this plug out because if you are out on one of your trips and you see a munched flytrap, especially if it's got frass or bug poop on it, or it has a bunch of little holes, flip up the leaves and see if it's being fed on by any caterpillars. Snap a pic and shoot me a message. That could be huge, especially in South Carolina where it hasn't been observed before. That would be very interesting to know. Ooh, there's some feeding signs. I just wanted to thank the folks that supported me, and that includes the North Carolina Native Plant Society and my committee. And then finally, I'll just do a quick plug, though you're all familiar. My current position is with Xerces Society. I run the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas. I was invited by Maeve, who attended one of these Southeast Bumblebee Atlas events. And so if you're interested in understanding bumblebees on the landscape, on wild plants, or in your back garden, here's how you can learn more. You can visit bumblebeeatlas.org, or you can shoot me a message at my Xerces address, or you can ask me flytrap questions at either my Xerces address or my personal address, which is right there. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
That was awesome. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
You have a question in the back. Yes.
Yeah, so Lori, when you talk about the size of populations of flytrap, how are you defining population?
Could you hear that?
Yes, I could hear that. So the way that the Natural Heritage Program or NatureServe defines populations for Venus flytrap is it's any group of individuals that's at least 2 kilometers from another group of individuals, assuming there's good habitat between them. If there's a road between them, it's every group of individuals that has 1 kilometer between them. If that makes any sense. So one individual could be a population so long as it's far enough away from other flytraps.
Neat. Any other questions?
What's the largest area, the largest habitat that's found, like, continuous?
Did you hear that?
I couldn't, could you repeat it?
What's the largest continuous habitat?
In terms of area, I am not sure, but I can tell you in terms of number of individuals because they're public about it on their site, and it is a known public place to go see them, is that the biggest population by far is Green Swamp, which is in, I forget which county, but it's southeastern North Carolina, about 45 minutes west of Wilmington, maybe.
Brunswick County.
Yeah, Brunswick.
Okay. Cool. So we will be your favorite Native Plant Society chapter ever if we send you a picture of the what was it, the Venus flytrap cutworm?
Yes, absolutely. You'd be a bunch of moth people's favorite chapter ever.
We have an assignment for our next field trip, or yeah.
Well, and that also might be really important for like further protections of Lewis Ocean Bay Heritage Reserve. You know, we all talk about how important the Venus flytrap is, but hey, get out there and find some of them Cutworm moths, we might have a real fight on it.
Yeah, the new poster child of our area. All right. Well, thank you, Lori, so much. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great meeting, y'all.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I have a question now that she's left.
Oh,
For the Lewis Ocean Bay, when we were there, the botanist was like, he didn't want us walking around areas, right, that are sensitive and
Yeah.
protected. So how would we do that?
It's a good question. You could let DNR loose.
You get invited to a field trip somewhere, somebody.
Yeah, we've had a field trip to Lewis Ocean Bay Heritage Preserve, and Friends of Lewis Ocean Bay have also host field trips there. And sometimes there's like one spot that they
Right.
show people that one place, so that's probably the best.
That's what we got. That's what we got.
Geared towards one spot.
I'm told never to reveal the.
Yeah,
location.
don't let anybody know where that spot is.
It's time for Plan of the Month. I was trying to find like an intro jingle, but if any musicians out there want to be creative and come up with a with a little intro jingle, we're open and receptive to that.
Davey.
I mentioned it to him, but I don't want to keep poking. So when I was considering plant of the month this month, I was thinking a lot about the weather that we've had recently. We had this very, very, very dry June. Basically, we had almost no rain for 4 or 5 weeks, as many of the kayakers who went out last weekend saw by the river levels. And then we hit July, and every day there is a thunderstorm, and at least at my house, there's been heavy rains for 4 nights in a row. And so there's this like flip-flop of this extreme drought followed by these heavy summer storms. So I came up with a plant that can tolerate both of those things. And it is Eryngium yucifolium, or rattlesnake master is the most common name that I hear it called. Also sometimes called bear grass or button snake root. These plants are native perennials. They come back year after year, and they are very drought tolerant once they're established, but they also can tolerate fairly wet soil, not like wetland soil, but they can take both. They like full blasting sun. It doesn't faze them at all. This picture on my right, your left is from my house. I just planted that plant this spring, and it's already shot up a flower spike. And then the other picture I stole from Wikipedia, but that's a more mature plant, so you can see how they grow into a clump over time. So they'll get a spread of about 2 to 3 feet. And those flower inflorescences can be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, depending on soil conditions and things of that nature. What they also like is soil with very low nutrients. So that's really nice when you have super sandy soil like I do. So I could just plop those in the ground. I didn't have to add any compost or anything like that. Let's see. Yeah.
How long do they stay in bloom?
They bloom starting in June and go through August. So they bloom pretty much all summer. Yep.
Is it that the bloom lasts or they're shooting up?
Yeah, so they're the inflorescences have multiple flowers on them, and those are sort of maturing at different times. So like right now, the ones at my house have some flowers that are going by, while they have other ones that are coming on, and there's a close-up of the flowers. Eryngium, I always like to get into the scientific names of these things. Eryngium is from the Latin erigion, which just means spiky plant. And if you know this species or other species within this genus, they often have these spiky bracts all around the flowers, and they also often have spikes on the leaves, and that's where that comes from. The specific name yuccafolium, it basically just means yucca like leaves. Folium means leaves, and so I've got some close-ups of the leaves as well, but they're just sort of describing that leaf shape. And it's in the Apiaceae, which is the carrot family, which I would not have guessed just by looking at it. It's actually related to things like parsnip and, like I said, carrots, Queen Anne's lace, which is not native, but they're in that same family. This is the native distribution. Actually, there's two varieties. I forgot to mention, there's variety yuccafolium and variety cincinnatum. And this is the distribution for variety yuccafolium, which is the more common one. So I figured that was the one to feature here. It had some extirpated and historical populations going all the way up into New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. And then it goes all the way south to the Florida Panhandle, west to Texas and Oklahoma, and then north again to Ohio. So it has a pretty decent large range, and you can see it's throughout South Carolina as an uncommon plant, but you know, they're far from rare. The other variety is more of a Florida species. We do have them in the coastal plain, but they're rare here and they're more found down towards Florida. So these are close-ups of the flowers. I took these this morning at my house. The flower parts are very, very tiny, and these are like clusters of flowers. They're white, as you can see, and they have this really light honey-like fragrance to them. So they are a fragrant flower. If you stick your nose right up in there, which I did this morning, and it's true, they are fragrant. So yeah, they're unique. They add a different texture to the garden than most other plants do. So I like them. I use them as kind of specimens. They're sort of flanking either end of like a pollinator border. So that's a good use for them. And these are the leaves. Like I said, they kind of resemble a yucca plant if they didn't have the flowers on them. They're a bit narrower. You can also see that they have these like spines on the edges of the leaves. They're not super prickly, but that's part of where that Eryngium name comes from.
Are they stiff?
The leaves, no, not too stiff. Can see some of them are flopping over there. They're not gonna like poke you. These are the seeds. The fruit of this plant is called a schizocarp, which is basically just a group of seeds all combined together that then break apart into individual seeds. If you collect these seeds, you need to cold moist stratify them for about a month before actually sowing them to grow.
So you don't think they'll self-seed here?
They will self-seed here. Yep. So if they fall off on the ground and they go through the winter, our natural winter here, they'll germinate on their own. But if you wanted to germinate them artificially, you would need to put them through cold moist stratification to break that physical dormancy. And I found this, I always love to do the faunal associations because I always find out things that I didn't know. The Eryngium stem borer is a moth species that is the larval host. This plant is the larval host for that moth. And it actually bores into the stem, puts a few eggs in there, and then the caterpillars hatch and live off of the plant. And then this is an example of a soldier beetle. Soldier beetles actually eat the pollen grains. They're very high in protein and nutrients, so those beetles really love them. And as far as pollinators go, basically everything gets attracted to this plant. All different kinds of bees, bumblebees, small bees, specialized bees. wasps, moths, and then as you can see, that is a monarch butterfly that loves to utilize this plant. So so yeah, you get a lot of bang for your buck with this. It's, you know, full sun, drought tolerant, can also take it wet, but also will draw a lot of native pollinators to your garden and support them as well. Yes.
Rabbits like them.
I don't know. I haven't had them eat them at my house. And I do have rabbits.
Did you say full sun?
Full sun, full blasting sun from sunrise to sunset.
Where do you get them?
Yeah, native plant sale, our native plant sale that's coming in the fall, and I'm guessing that some of the folks, you know, down in Charleston will have them. You know, native plant vendors will definitely carry them. Anybody else? Okay, that's native plant of the month. Yes.
Is this them? I just found that at my neighbor's.
No, this is hat pin. Hat pin.
At
Hat pin, like the
Oh,
pin that
hat
you
pin.
put in your hat. Because that's what they look like. Yep. Okay. Plant of the month. Boop, boop, boop. Like I said earlier, we have some things in the works for August, but they're not totally solidified yet. We're hoping to do a green drinks and, right, we still don't have a date, right?
It's gonna be towards the end of the month. Yeah. Nailing down a location.
Yeah, towards the end of the month, yeah.
end of this.
End of
August.
August.
Sorry.
Oh, because it says August.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
So again, that's just a social event to come out, hang out with us. Yeah.
Victoria, do we wanna talk about our little scheme that we thought of, about our, like, just so people
Yeah.
start to think about it?
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Our scheme. Call it, we're gonna do a
Can
plan.
you come up here to make sure folks on mic can hear?
There's your plan.
So we had talked about doing a plant swap, but with it being so hot, probably not a great time to do a plant swap in August. But we were thinking of like, what did we call it? Like a gear swap. So like if you have pots that you don't need and people need pots for like planting soon, bring those. If you have garden like tools that you have like 5 freaking trowels and you don't need all of them, but maybe there's somebody who's new and getting into gardening, bring that. Whatever you want to bring and swap, we'll do a swap. So that's kind of what we're thinking. Stay tuned. We'll have more details in the newsletter when it comes out next month. And as always, follow Green Drinks on Facebook and we'll keep you updated there too. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Gardening books, anything.
Oh, yeah, books.
Do some summer cleaning with your friends. And then, exciting, we finally have a date. And Kayla wants you to know that it is October 12th. So, yeah, this could be you in just a couple months. Woo! Okay, yeah, so that's really all we have. We will see you again in 2 months. Oh, I'm sorry that date's not on there.
The plant sale is going to be at a different location. We haven't nailed it down yet, but just a heads up that it won't be at the town green this round.
Mhm.
Cause it's
Dug up.
dug up. There's backhoes on it.
Um,
We believe so. I haven't confirmed the location yet.
TV Yeah.
And for those of you joining us online or those who might join us online, the Zoom link will change before the next meeting, but it'll be in the newsletter and everything. But in case you had that bookmarked, you'll same place, just different place, different link. All right. Anything else? I think we have some prizes too, some door prizes. Yeah.
Just one member update, Four Farms is having its fall plant sale October 5th, 8:30 to 3. Our fall plant sale mainly focuses on woodies and shrubs, because generally that's the best time of year to plant those. If you kind of follow us on social media, eventually there'll be a list of what we'll be selling. If you don't know where Laurel Farms is, it's in the bustling metropolis of Lake City, South Carolina, and lower Florence County, so about an hour drive from here.
Awesome. And that'll be in our newsletter, and I think we're working on a field trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So spoilers.
Hey,
Anything else? Yeah.
Hey, it's Maeve online.
Oh, Maeve's interrupting, but yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, yeah, we're planning a field trip to Moore Farms. I think it's going to be September 20th. Ranger Mike is kindly going to lead that trip, and we'll get the official date out in the newsletter. But we're looking at September.
And that is a weekday?
It's good. Yeah, it's a Friday. Moore Farms only does trips on weekdays, but hopefully that works out for a number of people, and we'll probably arrange some carpools. And we're so excited to go on a trip there because they have very kindly donated for our grant program.
Woo! And Maeve, you are at the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference?
Yes, my dispatch from the conference. It's a wonderful event. I am sad not to be in the room with everyone, but there's over 500 native plant people here, so we are in good company. I said to my sister, who was very much like an anime Comic-Con kind of kid growing up, I was like, this is my con. Like, this is all of the people I'm nerding out with. Yeah, no, it's great. I'm learning a lot. I'm representing the chapter. I smelled a hypericum that smelled like curry, and I smelled an orchid that smelled like rotting oysters. So it's been a great trip so far.
Awesome. Thanks, Maeve.
Yep,
Sorry.
thanks.
One more plant sale plug. So after you're done at Moore Farms on Friday, September 20th, you can head over to Brookreed on September 21st. Because that'll be our plant sale from 9:30 until 2, 9:30 when the gates open, but usually it's earlier than that, so we can't back up the highway, but we usually have native plants. I say mannerly exotics, we don't sell invasives, but I usually really recommend our fall sale because there's a lot of plants that are propagated from Brookreed collection on site, so you really get unique offerings there.
Cool. It's getting to that time to buy more plants. Anything else?
Conway Master Gardeners Association will be having a plant sale. I believe it's September 9th, Saturday. And we're not having invasives either, but there'll be a mix of house plants. Just different plants for folks at the farmers market. That's it.
Awesome. We'll work on getting all this in our newsletter. Y'all start saving up. All right. So before we grow our roots, we want to give away some roots. You have here, let Evan pull one.
Sure.
Did everyone get a ticket?
Yeah.
There's no matter.
Yeah.
All right, our first winner, 678 255.
255.
255?
Yeah.
There you go, congrats.
Thank you.
Everybody loves tree plant. All right, next winner, 678-257. All right, 678-258. I'll bring a little bit.
They all work at the rotary, they get all the plans the same.
I don't know if it's.
678-256. Just go down. All right. 678-266. All right.
I just tables on a roll.
Since I don't have a good spot, this.
Totally up to you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. 678-254.
Yeah. So it has to be wet.
Let's let the, so we got a weather party. Okay. Thank you. I mean, if you got like an ace drip or anything, compensation, might be a good place to put it. All right, 678-265. 265.
Oh, that's me, we're, sorry.
Yeah, right. 678-262.
I'm not supposed to get one.
All right, last one, hopefully. 678-261. All right. Congratulations. Because these are locally protected from Williamsburg County, found them on the side of the road, I got the seed from it. It's a lot more hardy, lasts a little bit longer, takes more full sun as well than a lot of the cardinal flowers you find in nurseries. Typically because in the nursery trade, the genetics are from the plants that are further north into this area, so they're a lot better performing. Yeah, they're good, pretty decent size on flower stock.
Woo. Thank you so much for that great surprise. Cool. Yeah, feel free to bring your leftover native plants to the meeting. Wow. That's a good way to make friends. So, all right. That's all we have for you tonight, folks. You're welcome to mingle. We have some Native Plant Society tote bags and some of our stickers. If you'd like to purchase those, you can talk to Babs about your membership if you're unsure. Volunteer for the communications committee with Catherine, talk about grants with Evan, and then that's all she wrote. So thank you so.
Hey, we've gotten applications that like clearly like. Once,
Yeah.
It's not.